Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order the special meeting for the Board of Education for Tuesday, May 28th, 2019. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Someday.
I'd like to remind everyone that this is a special public comment regarding the composition of potential trustee voting areas associated with the district's transition to the by-trustee area election system in advance of the preparation of draft trustee voting area plans. Per Government Code 54954.3, it is against the law at special meetings for the board to allow comments on non-agendized items during special meetings. So with that being said, Meg, ask a roll call, please.
Here. Here.
Here. Here.
Here. Thank you. May I have a motion and a second to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion on that?
None.
Roll call, please.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to the public hearing on 3.1. Again, public hearing regarding the composition of potential trustee voting areas associated with the district's transition to a by-trustee area election system in advance of the preparation of draft trustee voting areas. Are there any speakers?
There are. The first speaker is David Watley. After David Watley will be Michael Gardner.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we probably should do a presentation first.
That would help. I'm sorry.
I believe we have some amendments to the presentation.
Yes.
From last year.
From last time.
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening,
Take it away.
Board of Directors, Dr. Smith, staff, cabinet, community. I'm Jonathan Salt, and I'm joined by Andrew Chittapong of Cooperative Strategies. They're the demographic firm that will be helping the district prepare the map options throughout this transition process. I've got, where am I supposed to point this? There we go. The reason that we're here is the California Voting Rights Act. It passed about 15 years ago, and it prohibits the use of at-large election systems if those systems impair the ability of members of protected classes to influence the outcome of an election or to elect candidates of their choice. A key issue here with the CVRA is that no intent is required, and so the school district having at-large elections, you don't have to intentionally be having them to intend to cause issues with minority populations. It's just having them. If it prohibits the ability to increase influence, that could be an illegal election in California. It's much more broad than the Federal Voting Rights Act, and so it's very easy for a prospective plaintiff to bring a claim against the government entity, and proof of intent is not required. It's just if you have at-large elections and it can be shown to cause issues and dilute voting, it could be an illegal election. Another issue here with why this is popping up around the state and now more so in Northern California than before is that the CVRA permits a prevailing plaintiff to recover their attorney's fees or their expert fees should a case go to litigation. But if a school district or city wins, they're not afforded that same right. Another key component here is that no city or school district has ever successfully defended a claim alleging a CVRA violation, and those who have fought it have spent millions of dollars and still lost and still had to switch. City of Palmdale owed the other side $7 million, and recently in the fall, City of Santa Monica went to hearing, lost, and it's estimated that they'll owe about $10 million to the other side, plus about $5 million in their own defense. Possibly.
Can we get some help from the back on the clicker?
The board needs a lot of help, so that would be a good one.
I'll just give you a thumbs up. Okay. So what is a by-trustee area election system? It's the only safe harbor from a CVRA litigation claim, and the school district will be divided into 5 equal population areas called trustee areas, and a governing board member will be elected from each trustee area. However, all current trustees serve out their full term no matter where you were elected. And so only registered voters of the drawn trustee areas will be able to vote for the trustees in that area. The law changed recently, 3 years ago, with the process for transitioning. Now, AB 350 provides several new issues. The first is plaintiff fee reimbursement. So just sending a demand letter to a city or school district and saying, hey, your elections violate the CVRA. If you, in response to that letter, start the process, they can't sue you, but you can owe them up to $30,000 for the work they put in to write that demand letter and for their demographic work as well. Additionally, this is the second one of the 2 pre-map public hearings. That's a newer requirement. Board must have 2 pre-map public hearings in a 30-day period of time prior to ever even drawing a map. And the entire transition takes place in about 90 days, so we have until late July to finish this process at this time. However, the law also permits a one-time 90-day extension where if the prospective plaintiff agrees, the board can extend its deadline an additional 90 days and post all of its hearing dates and things like that so that the community can have additional notice and be better prepared to look at map options, et cetera. So where we are now is like I just mentioned, we're in the second of 2 pre-map public hearings before maps are ever drawn. And so we're looking for feedback from the community and board of maybe which areas of town make sense to keep together as one group or maybe make good dividing lines. And so with that, I'll hand it back over to Andrew. But I also want to comment at the last meeting that there was, in the northern part of the district, there was a little bit of a discrepancy about the northern boundary in that industrial area. The county office believes that this is the current district outline. However, it's slightly different than the district's attendance areas, but nobody lives there anyway, so it doesn't impact the population balance on the maps, but this is how the county sees the district's boundaries.
All right, so we do have the district's demographics here on this slide. As you can see at the bottom of the table, the total population using the 2010 census is 75,211. If we divide that by 5 for the 5 board members, each area is going to contain roughly about 15,000. And we do have a 10% variance between the smallest area and the largest area. So each area is going to have a plus or minus 1,500. So we do have a demographic breakdown of each demographic group, the Hispanic Latino at being at 24.81%, the white population being at 15.14%, African American at 6.21%, American Indian 0.18%, and the largest protected class being the Asian category at 47.6%. And we also have the population of people who are 18 years and older, and that is 56,827, as well as their demographic breakdown. And on the left of the map, we just have the geographic profile of the school district with the neighboring cities. And on this next slide, we have all the census blocks that are within the school district. So the census blocks are the smallest geographic feature that is provided by the census. Each census block is going to contain a number. That number is represented by the total population within each census block. And just to zoom in to get a closer look, so these are the census blocks in the northern part of the school district. And you can see some larger census blocks contain maybe 3 to 20 people, but that is the industrial area that we were talking about earlier, whereas the more residential areas, the smaller blocks, will contain between 40 and several hundred.
So essentially, each census block is a Lego that's going to be used to put the maps together. And as you can see, sometimes the larger Legos don't have a lot of value. There's only 3 people in that northern area, for example. But as you get smaller, some of them have a couple hundred people in each one, so it just very much depends. And these maps will be available shortly on the district website for public review, and you can zoom in and see each census block and its total number.
So what we do is we add each census block until we get about 15,000, and then we'll move on to the next area and keep creating areas of roughly 15,000 in population using these numbers. So what we're mainly going to focus on is the district's citizens voting age population. So these are all your eligible voters within the school district, those who are 18 years and older, as well as citizens. In the table on the right, you can see that your eligible voters for the school district is roughly about 51,824, with the demographic breakdown of the Hispanic Latino community being just above 20%, also the white population being at 20.3%, African American at 6.16%, American Indian at 0.43%, and the largest category, the Asian population at 48.65%. And on the left, we have the density map of the Asian citizens voting age population. So lighter colors representing lower dense areas, and the darker blue areas representing higher density Asian citizens voting age
And that's density per how many people in that area, not that the area itself is dense. And you'll see that on the next map.
So just to get a closer look, we're going to zoom up to the southern part of the school district. And you can see that, I'm not sure if you can see it from here, but each number is roughly between 50 to several hundred. We have census blocks that contain about 300, so if we keep adding all these census blocks together, you'll get 15,000 pretty quickly. So we'll probably have to divide this southern portion into two areas, as well as another example on the western side. This is also the Asian density population for your eligible voters. Because they are the largest protected class in the school district, we want to increase their voting power and influence during the next election. So we'll try to create these areas where they're all together to give them a stronger voting power. And as well as the Hispanic Latino community, which is the next largest protected class. And you can see in the center of the school district where Whipple Road and Mission Boulevard intersect, that darker red area is where the highest concentration of the eligible Hispanic Latino voters reside. And just to get a closer look there. So these numbers, as we were mentioning earlier, the size of the census block doesn't necessarily mean larger population. So these also range between 50 and several hundred. We have longer census blocks on the most western side at 250 and the southern side at around 200. And we're just going to add these up to make 15,000 people in this area.
And so the purpose of these meetings is essentially, how does the board, how does the community, what ideas do you have, and how these maps should be drawn by the demographer? And so this is just an overview map, obviously, so you can see some of the major roads. Those yellow lines are larger roads. So for example, I'd like neighborhood X and neighborhood Y to stay in the same area. That's the kind of feedback we're looking for. Or these are just me looking at that larger map, and you can use that and say, I think the 880 makes sense as a boundary because it's a giant road that splits the district in half, or I think Alvarado Boulevard makes sense. And so this is just suggestions. This is just from me looking at the map one time, but you all live in the community. You know what areas make sense to stay together, and you know what areas could be separated. So where we are now, the criteria of what's going to be used to draw the maps, as Andrew mentioned, equal population is the most important, but there are other factors as well.
So some other considerations that we take into account when we're drawing these areas is that it must comply with the U.S. Constitution. Like we said earlier, equal in population, comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act, be geographically contiguous, keep local communities of interest together, be geographical compact, and cannot favor or discriminate an incumbent or a political candidate. So it is a consideration, but it cannot be the sole consideration.
And so lastly, again, the maps that are going to be prepared and the map the district will ultimately adopt doesn't change the district's overall boundaries. It doesn't change where anybody's students go to school. It's still one district with common goals and challenges. And with that, actually, before we jump to the public hearing, the next steps of this process require that the demographer will draw map options that will be shared with the community, and there'll be 3 additional public hearings where folks can comment on the map options, and those haven't been scheduled yet. And so they'll either be scheduled soon, or perhaps the district wants to consider a 90-day extension to have this play out in the fall when everyone's back from break is another option as well. Both are equally viable.
Thank you. And I think I just want to remind everyone that the information that you presented is based on the 2010 consensus, and we will have the updated version in 2020.
Yes, so in terms of equal population, the data we're looking at there is the most recent census because that's an accurate count of every nose in the district at that time. Everything else is an estimate, and so the protected class populations, those are more recent estimates based on rolling data conducted by the census. But in terms of putting together 15,000 roughly per area, that's based on the last census because it was then accurate. After the new census comes out, the district has to evaluate its maps and adjust if there's population imbalance, but if there's not, it doesn't have to do anything.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions or comments? We'll start with Mr.
I'll just
Member
do one and
Nishida.
then I'll
Yeah.
have a few, so I'll just, okay. All right, so the first one, question I have is, what is the relationship between any map boundaries we have and existing voting precincts? Should they actually line up, or do we have the ability, I mean, should they line up with the boundaries of existing voting precincts?
A census block can't be split, but however the district ends up adopting the map options, as long as you can't split a census block because then you don't know what your population is in each area, right? Because you're guessing, let's say there's 100 people in one census block, you can't split it. You don't know if 50 live in each side, but for precincts, you can split precincts and the county will have to just readjust after the map is done. You just can't split census blocks.
Okay. So from a voting operation standpoint, in other words, because if voters in one district can only vote for one set of candidates, it seems like the voting precincts would have to line up. I wanted to see what the considerations were with existing precincts.
The county will look at that and make sure that it's accurate for the first election under this new system and systems thereafter. And I'm not exactly sure if there are 2 or 3 seats up for election in 2020. I think you had
three for 2020.
3 for 2020. So only 3 of the areas will have an election in 2020.
Okay. Cool.
I have no question.
So, like Lance has asked about the relationship between the existing precincts, my understanding is the county readjusts the precincts anyway in all elections because based on the how many voting precincts they have or how many precincts they want to set up. And my question would be that is this data in the presentation, is it real data? Is it the accurate and real data?
I'm sorry, I can hear you.
I think
in the
your
presentation.
microphone.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's the mistake.
Thank you.
The data in the presentation you have presented, is it real? And are those numbers real?
Yes, so if, all the zoomed in, that's each census block. That's how many people live in each census block. And the rest of the data is all real as well.
And that's based on the 2010 you said, and this not has been updated.
The total population information, whether that's census block by census block or the original first slide that shows the total population, that's based on the 2010 census. But the citizen voting age population data is based on a rolling estimate conducted by the Census Bureau.
So the community members, if they want to, they can start compiling the numbers to make it like 15,000, so they have a kind of initial work plan.
There is a toolkit that we can have released where folks can input and kind of draw their own maps. And as long as it works out, they can submit that map for consideration. And we'll work with the district staff to figure out the timing of that and the future meetings as well.
I know there will be 3 more hearings after this, but will there be any opportunity for the community, such as workshop from the demographer, so that community can actually come and participate to compile or construct the maps?
The board can call for additional meetings. They don't have to be public hearings. I mean, there are required public hearings, but you can also call for community meetings as well, where as long as there's not a board majority at the meeting, it could be less formal than this, and folks can come and ask questions and talk about the maps.
The last question would be that you have mentioned in your presentation that the 90-day limit can be extended one time with the if the both parties, or the MALDEF, if they agree. So that 90-day limit will be from, what will be the initial date? So
as of right now, based on when the board passed its original resolution.
April 30th, yes.
So I think July 29th, because there have been 2 31-day months since then. July 28th is the final day that the entire process has to be done.
Yes.
But if the district were to agree with MALDEF for a 90-day extension, it could be pushed out as late October.
So it'll be from July 29, 3 more months.
Yes.
Thank you. That's it.
That was my question. I wanted to know if it was additional 90 days. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. And I think we're going to have.
I just have one question. What's the goal of this? Is the goal to ensure diversity of the board, which means you draw your boundaries one way? Or is the goal to ensure that the community has, that marginalized groups have more representation? Those are two different things.
The makeup of the board is less relevant for the purposes of the CVRA. It's all about empowering members of protected classes to have an influence. It doesn't mean that choice has to be of someone of the same protected class.
Yes.
It's just about creating areas that might, amongst other factors, that might increase the ability. So just the Hispanic population, for example, is about 20% of the district by CVAP, but there's a large concentration. So if that large concentration ended up in the same area, it wouldn't surprise me if that group makes up 40% of that area. That is increased influence.
Okay, I think having that extra 90 or 30 days will really allow the community to provide their feedback. I know that summer a lot of parents, a lot of community members are out, so it would be beneficial to have that. But I'm going to put that to a motion.
Actually, I do have one more question.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I noticed in your the way that the demographic categories are there, you have Asian. Asian's a very big group. I think that is actually very diverse in a lot of. So I guess the question is there any distinction that is available to include subgroups within the Asian larger group?
We can look into that. It may not be exactly accurate, though, because as you know, on most of those forms, a lot of the input is optional for race or for gender, for example. But we can look into making sure that we have as best data as we can, other than what's already out here.
Okay.
Just to relating to the last question, because I see in the school data when we present here, there is a specific category because of number of Filipino community members in our district. So I was just wondering that how come that category is not present here? It was just, I don't know, you don't have to have the answer right now. If you have it, then
what was the category?
Between the Asian, like Lance has mentioned, between the Asian, there are Indians, Chinese, or maybe Filipinos. Usually we do see Filipinos distinguished, but in this area we have not seen that.
We can look into that. I'm not sure the kind of data the district keeps on that specifically, because this is for everybody who lives in this area, not just for people who attend district schools. But we'll look into that and see if we can provide a greater breakdown of if it can be done accurately.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we do the take a vote on that, on the 90-day extension, did you have anything else to add?
One more thing.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend taking a vote on it.
Right, no, we're going to have,
You can
open it to the public.
Provide guidance.
Yes. But we will be taking action on that tonight, is what I'm saying. So before we do that, we're going to open it up to
Hold on.
the public hearing.
There's no action item.
Right. So
Yeah, we're not.
the board can provide direction for us
Okay.
to go seek.
Yes, so we will be doing that after the public hearing.
Okay.
So may I ask how many speakers we have on the topic?
5, 6.
Okay. And
The first speaker
each
will
speaker
be
will have 3 minutes, so we'll go ahead and get started with the first speaker.
David Watley, and then after David Watley is Michael Gardner.
Good afternoon, good evening, honorable school board members. My name is David Watley, and I actually am a resident of the Dakota neighborhood. My family has been in Union City for over 60 years in Dakota. I actually grew up in Dakota, Fairway Park, and West Hayward, and attended, in part, New Haven Unified Schools, including Dakota Elementary, Barnard White, Hillview Crest, and Logan for 1 year. Finished off in Hayward Unified. So I actually support these efforts. I think that they're a step in the right direction for the community. I think it's important to keep in mind that these type of efforts are a part of the larger Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965, which, as we know, is a part of civil rights legislation. So I think that, unfortunately, you know, our community does suffer from several issues pertaining to civil rights, particularly in Dakota. We have lots of problems with gangs still, with drugs, with incarceration. So these are challenges that often come up, as we know, not only at our local city council, but here at the school board as well. If we take a look at our test scores, for example, for New Haven, if we look at the protected class of Latinos, for example, and African Americans, we can see that they are consistently behind their Asian and Caucasian counterparts. So I think that this piece of civil rights legislation, that's sort of this local policy action that we're taking in support of the broader civil rights legislation, is definitely a step in the right direction. And I think that we should keep the history of Dakota in mind and of Fairway Park. I think speaking to what the demographer called last week in his presentation, communities of interest, I think that Fairway Park and Dakota should be included in one district. I think that they share many commonalities pertaining to English learners, challenges with parents who come from Spanish-speaking homes. So when we are making a district, we need to put both of those communities into one district, because a representative for that district can, I think, effectively, I would imagine and I would hope, although we know that it's not always the case. We look at every case study that there is, it's that they would be able to represent that community. And with that, I would like to thank you for taking time and efforts to proceed in this direction. Thank you.
May I remind members of the community, if you are blocking the doorways, please clear the doorways, and also if you are leaning on a light switch, to step away from that as well. If you have the light switches behind you, if you can turn the lights back on.
If it was only so easy to enlighten y'all.
So we'll wait for the lights to turn or come back on.
Jason here?
That's one over there.
If you have the light switches behind you, can you please switch them back on?
Not back there. Is Jason here?
Hold on, oh wait. It's actually on topic, so, I don't know. I'm gonna nerd out.
We don't need to see you.
I am okay to proceed if you can hear me and it gives a better view of the map, which is what I actually want to talk about.
Go for it.
All right, though I have two parts. They're both on topic, I promise. I promise. The first is a question. You said in your presentation that according to the way this goes, that people who are voted in office remain in office. And my question is, are there any precedent of having a clear election of all the school board members when they go to new districts?
The education code, and I think the election code as well, specifically states that during a convention like this, you serve out your full term.
Mm-hmm.
There have been cases where someone didn't try to make this transition, and then they went to court and lost, and the court can impose that.
Okay, thank you. Though the main thing I want to talk about is the Latino districts. I'm a teacher. I've been here for 6 years, and I grew up in Fremont right next door. So I know some things about Union City, but wouldn't consider myself an expert. One way that Union City is different from Fremont is there's a very stronger sense of Union City than there is for Fremont among the people. So I'm speaking kind of as an outsider, and I just want to recognize that. But my impression as someone here is that the Latino neighborhoods feel that they're the ones not being represented overall. And though the purpose of the voting, the law is to make sure that protected classes have a voice, and I feel that their voice is not being represented. And though The last speaker said that he felt that those two red districts there on the top should be one group, if I'm understanding the map correctly. I think that actually that would create like a token Latino candidate who would have minimized power and would actually take power because it's all packed into one district. And I feel that those two different areas should be separated, in particular because my experience in Union City is that the closer you are to Dakota and the further you are to Hayward, the culturally different they are. It's just a little bit more, it gets more gentrified the closer you get to Dakota. It always remains Latino, but the deeper you get towards Hayward, the more, like, I don't want to say authentically, but the more old school Latino it seems from this white guy's perspective, but what do I know? Okay, but that's my feedback on the map. Thank you.
Next speaker is Roland Valina, and after Roland Valina is Don Heinsohn.
Oh, no, that's not for this. I just want to make sure that this is on topic. I just want to make sure that the demographer during their drawing process takes into account the existence of communities within Union City, like the Tropics on Alvarado Niles, a sub-community for older members of the population, and makes sure that these communities aren't split between two districts, meaning that one person may have a different ballot from their neighbor next door. The same thing must be said of townhome communities and apartment complexes. Priority must be put to make sure that these subdivisions and subcommunities are put in the same district, just for the sake of voter experience. And furthermore, I would like to inform the demographer, if they haven't been informed already, that the city of Union City is also undergoing the process of switching to trustee areas, and would like to suggest and request that the trustee areas are drawn in a way that is similar to the city's trustee areas. This is to ensure the easiest voting experience for the citizen. For example, let's take Monty, who lives on Sunsprite Drive. If the city puts Sunsprite Drive in one trustee area, but Monty's neighbor could possibly have a completely different ballot, because the city could be putting Sunsprite Drive in one trustee area while the district puts it in another trustee area. And we want to make sure that people on the same street have the same ballot, just for the sake of, you know, not creating voter irregularities. Thank you.
Next speaker is Don Heinsohn. After Don Heinsohn is Michelle Parnala.
May need a. Got it. I have the app. I'm tech savvy. My name's Don Heinz. I've been teaching for 34 years, since 1996 in this district. Shortly after I arrived here, there was a crisis when Guy Emanuel left us and Ruth McKenna replaced him. In 2000, the community and the teachers worked together with this map to affect the election of board members. We were looking for board members who would listen to the community and represent the community. In the 2000 election, we put together 100 teams, each one with about 100 door hangers and 100 addresses of frequent voters, and we carpeted Union City 2 consecutive Saturdays. And the board changed from 4-1 supporting the superintendent to 3-2 supporting the superintendent. In 2002, we repeated the process again, and the board changed from 3-2 no longer supporting the superintendent, and we had a new superintendent. And of course, we had new school board members. And things were pretty fractious, not as fractious as this, but pretty dang fractious. And at the same time, the district said, we need a school bond. I am proud to say, as president of the teachers union at the time, despite the fact of our bad relationship, I sat in the bond oversight committee, and I said, I realized that the district didn't know what they were doing about passing a bond. So I and CTA went and got a consultant group to give the district the message to pass the bond. And we did it a 5th and 6th time. 100 car teams, 12 and 13,000 door hangers, and we passed the school bond by 60 votes. There's $120 million new dollars worth of buildings in this district because we did that. Now, the elephant in the room here is, of course, that we have a strike on our hands. It seems to me that what's happening is that the district is the trustees of the district are believing the school district's numbers. So let me give you some reassurances. Because this is going to end, and it's not going to end on the district's terms. In the last 4 years, 18, 19, 17, 18, 16, 17, 15, 16, the district came in with 5, 5.2, 6.7, and $18 million more than projected. When this year's budget closes, there's going to be proof that there was enough. I'm short of time. Last year, the district spent $130 million. This year, it's going to spend $134. $4 million new dollars, $2.6 million less for teachers. If you would simply direct your employees to spend as much on teachers this year as last year, this would end. We get our COLA raise, which is only fair, and this district would go back to trying to rebuild itself. The question is, when these elections things, where the trustees now stand and when the people running for office stand on elementary class size and this strike and believing this district,
thank you.
We could make a lot of noise, but we're past that now. Direct the district employees to settle this strike on fair terms. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Michelle Parnella. After Michelle Next speaker is Michelle Parnell. After Michelle Parnell,
I'm not going to take long.
Stacy
Take my minute.
Kalimlim.
So a couple of the other speakers already answered some of my questions and asked some of my questions, but I just, well, this is excruciating as a former board member to sit here and just, again, I said it last time I was up here. I'm going to say it again. The only 0% in this room is the lack of leadership. It is really, really painful that at minimum, you guys have been on the board, the new members, 2 years. The rest of you are in your third term. And we still don't have an idea of what the role of the board is. And we're not really quite sure how to facilitate a meeting.
Ms. Pernella, may I ask you that you stay on the topic, please?
Oh, I'm getting there. Thank you.
You're the topic.
So with regard to the maps and the trustee areas, just want everybody to remember why representation is important, okay? So, Mr. Gardner, thank you for bringing up those very poignant facts about the Dakota neighborhood. I'm a Dakota girl, and a very, 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 very proud Dakota girl. And I'm a product of this district, and it pains me not to be seen by some of you folks sitting up there. Pains me. My kids are multi-ethnic, and it pains me that you guys don't see them. So you guys can go ahead and do your thing.
Next speaker is Stacy Kalimlim.
Hi, my name is Stacy Kalimlim, and I'm a parent in the New Haven community. I'm also a first grade teacher in Fremont Unified. Thank you. In terms of following the demographics and whatnot, I have these questions when we're trying to figure out the boundaries is, are we going to be trying to, as we're trying to balance populations and ethnicities, to see if we fit the current trustees into proper areas, or as close as we can to have them each represent their area, because we have 3 trustees up for re-election in 2020, and there's a lot of people here who have a lot to say, and we want trustees who will put our students and our educators first. We need trustees that will listen to our educators. They are in the classrooms. They are there supporting our students day in, day out. Admin has their roles, and they make a lot of money, and they have the Me Too clause. They have COLA written into their contracts. Why can't our educators get that as well? We need our educators. Thank you.
Final speaker is John Gallagher. Is John Gallagher here?
Yeah. My name is John Gallagher. I am a parent of 2 kids in New Haven Unified, and I'm sick of what's going on right now. We have 11,000 students that are not in school. We have 600 teachers that are waiting to go back to their classrooms and teach what needs to be taught to them. My question to the presenters is, what is the procedure for recall? Does it change at all? Does it change at all in regards to this presentation as far as that is concerned? I can't take it. We have kids that are staying at home. They have nothing to do. As a working parent, I cannot provide daycare every single day. I cannot guarantee that if I send them to school, that they're going to be in a safe environment. I could walk right on. I could walk right on to any of the campuses right now, or during the school day, and it wouldn't be safe. So my question to the presenters is, is the process for recalls changed at all?
Thank you. That was our last speaker with no further business. This meeting is adjourned.
Settle this contract! Now! We want leadership! Now! 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 Settle this contract! Now! We want leadership! contract. Now. We want leadership. Now. Settle this contract. Now. We want leadership. Now. Settle this contract. Now. Where are you going? Leadership. Where are you going? On vacation. Now. We want leadership. Now. Settle this contract. 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 Now. We want
Whose house are we going to tonight?
I'm done. I can't chant anymore for the next 2 days.
Because they are cowards. Good job, Carolyn. You guys want a water? Oh, yeah.